And so as we cover all of this, I'm going to be diving deep into various aspects. While there's a lot of material to cover, each of you individuals, I have made this campus live now, so you have the opportunity to go through, read through the material. I do encourage you to go through every piece of it because not only have I revisited everything, provided some different examples, some clarity, so that you guys can better understand how negotiable instruments work and really the basic fundamentals of them. Because I think the biggest mistake people are making is they want to get in this rush of paying their bills and discharging debt. They're not taking the time to learn anything. It's similar to the credit repair space where we have all these amazing ways to remove items off of your credit, but if you're just not learning the basics of how a credit profile works and the basic fundamentals of the structure of a credit profile, you'll never really understand whether or not a process works or if it doesn't work, what to do next. And so all of this information is foundational, while towards the end we really get into a lot of the step-by-step process, right? And so really, once we get to the examples and the monthly statement section is where we cover mainly how to read your monthly statements, your bonds, how stamps work, how they look, the different types of stamps, how to which ones to restrict, the different types of negotiable instruments, and it goes in depth. And so we're really covering the foundational pieces because everyone loves to ignore the boring stuff. But the boring stuff is the reason why a lot of people aren't getting any traction with applying these processes, right? And also it comes down to understanding how to navigate through each of them because every bond is different. Every billing statement is different, right? Some bonds have the coupon on the top, some have the coupon on the bottom. And if you just don't understand the basics, the general intro level stuff, then you shouldn't even bother trying this. I'm just being upfront with whoever wants to just get in and try to cover their billing statements as if this is like a cookie cutter for everything. No, you have to learn this stuff. You have to understand it. Then when you apply it, you have to understand what to navigate, whether you filled out an instrument incorrectly, you endorsed it improperly, and you can start using process of elimination to identify what problems you may have run into. And so the way I'm covering 2.0 is as if I was going into it in the administrative aspect, right? And so before, what I was sharing was all right because I was covering specifically what to do in the sense of endorsements, CFRs, as well as I provided examples of individuals that had success in different ways. While I went back, I revisited all of that information. I revisited all of the instructions, and I started to realize that it worked for some individuals, but there were some things that were missing according to the instructions. And so 2.0 is strictly through instructions. Like we're sticking all 100% to the instruction. Like we're not following, outsider examples. Like we're sticking to the book. Like this is tooth and nail by the book, what it says, what the law says, how it's being articulated, and the instructions it's providing us. Because in the end of the day, it's ultimately what we're going to be using to enforce. And if there's any sort of gap between what the law says and what you applied, you set yourself up for failure. And I learned this from reading agreements, right? Because when we read agreements, the number one thing that people make a mistake of doing is they get into an agreement, they don't read it or know the ins and outs of the agreement, and they attempt to enforce some sort of dispute, or they try to engage in a dispute or a resolution with that creditor, but don't get any solution because the agreement had a specific way that they agreed to dispute things or they agreed to negotiate, right? And so it's quite similar here where I'm tooth and nail sticking to the instructions, and I'm telling you guys this strictly from experience and really going back to the foundational piece of how everything should work, right? Should never really look outside other than what's in front of us. And so, what all this information is going to be covering It's strictly what is in there. And so when we think about a trust, right? When we're when we're using negotiable instruments, we're ultimately leveraging the trust, right? It's all coming down to the trust, right? All the payments are going through the trust. All the statements, right, are all based on the trust. And so how do you now make it known on paper that you are the administrator of the trust? And so the first step I would take if I was starting today, and this is the very first thing that I was learning, I would start by going through and creating a filling out a 2848 and a Form 56 for the IRS. Why? Because as a trustee of a revocable trust, you'll be administrating financial instruments, managing the assets, and dealing with creditors. And you must notify the IRS that you are acting in a fiduciary capacity. You hold the power of attorney for financial and tax matters. All right. We're dealing with financial and tax matters in this situation when it comes to those monthly billing statements. And this is why we're covering this. You want to prevent unauthorized third parties or creditors to act on your behalf. And you do this by filing these key documents with the IRS. Now, I show you guys exactly how to do that here in creating a trust, right? The 2848 form, I have a video step by step, and I have the examples here of how to do so. And so you guys can reference that to fill out the 2848 and the 56. So I won't cover that in detail, but just know you have that resource here in the trust module. Now, once you've downloaded everything, you filled it out, make sure you fill it out accordingly to the video. I've added additional step-by-steps here so you guys can follow, but you can always revert back to the trust campus where I do cover filling out that form. Now, notice how I have trusts here at the very top above the bill remittance section, right? We cover status correction, the state citizen passport, the national passport, trusts, creating a revocable trust. And then we continue with the rest, tax purposes, and we start dealing with debt discharge remedies. Guys, it's all in order for a specific reason, right? And a lot of us are skipping right to the bill remittance. We're going from the top module to the bottom, and then we're wondering what's going on and why we're not organized. And so this is no different from what I've already covered in the past. But I'm revisiting all of this because I really think that it's important that you guys really understand the importance of slowing down to speed up, because if you're just rushing to get things done because of urgent matters, it's like, why not just get it right the first time? And why not just slow down and understand it as much as possible? Because you need to learn it anyways. Why you rush it just to fail because you rushed it, and then you still have to go back and do it again? Just get it right the first time. And so I want to make sure you guys have everything you need to execute this. And so the reason why these documents really matter, guys, is because the 2840 and the 56 are filed with the IRS, and legally sufficient. You want to send a courtesy notice to each creditor. That's what I share with you guys. It's not mandatory, right? You guys don't have to. And I'm saying this again, it's not mandatory, because once you have it filed with the IRS, the creditors, if they ever wanted to file anything financially, it has to be through the IRS. It's the only way. And so if there are no power of attorneys on file, then they can leverage any agreements you may have to claim power of attorney. And so you want to make sure that you have this stuff on file with them, and so that you don't run into that situation where they're attempting to claim or they're claiming power of attorney, right? And once you've submitted your power of attorney online, I do recommend that you guys go through and confirm that it has been filed, right? Because you're going to send it to them certified mail, as I share in the original video, and green return receipt. Once you receive the green return receipt, you wait 7 business days, call them, and then confirm the irs.gov account. Like, check your portal, right? I believe it's idme.com .irs, if I'm not mistaken, but it is the IRS portal you want to log into. And then in the power of attorney tab, you should be able to click on it and it will say that you have officially have a 2848 power of attorney on file. If you don't have that, then it simply means that it's not on record that you are a power of attorney, right? And that's really how you confirm that they have not one received it, but also they have filed it because they have to do both. They have to receive it and then file it. And your agree and return receipt is your confirmation of receipt. But if you're waiting and you see like 7 days go by and you haven't reached out and more time goes by, it's because you need to follow up to make sure that they are filing it and that it's in the system, right? You can call them and say, hey, I'm just calling to confirm you received my power of attorney documents. Is there anything else you need from me? Right? And then if it's not, if they have received it, you want to verify that it's being processed, right? And you want to make sure it has been processed because it will reflect on the website. And so again, the notice to the creditors is optional, right? I say this because again, everyone wants to take things verbatim, but ideally what you're sending when you're sending a notice is just a notice. Think of it like a late payment. If you were 30 days late on a credit card or auto loan, do you ever respond to the creditors? No, you're not gonna write them a letter back. Like, hey, I know I'm late on the payment, this is happening. No one's doing that. You received a notice, now you know. That's it. So you send them a notice, now they know. And then you just need to keep proof that you sent them notice. Right? That's all you need. There's no like magic answer that you're supposed to expect from them. Right? They're not supposed to reach out to you with the official notice that they received a document. It's not like that. It's simply a notice. And so when you file these documents, it blocks creditors or third parties from trying to assign themselves power of attorney over your person or trust, right? And again, persons as in corporation. Establishes you or your trust as a legal fiduciary administrator, enables the IRS to reject unauthorized filings and claims, right? This is extremely important. Gives you added weight when communicating with financial institutions or agencies, and also adds a strong lawyer protection of professional and to your trust. So again, this is mainly to have this stuff on file, right? Once you have them on file, you know, when you make a claim, you're like, hey, I'm the power of attorney. And they're like, well, prove it, right? Because everything's based on assumption, presumption until it's rebutted. And you're going to rebut it with the 2848 and a 56. That's it. It's simple. And with these two documents, again, the main benefits is to block the creditors and third parties from attempting to assign themselves over you. And so right now it's like an open door. And that's why we are sending power of attorneys to begin with, right? And so we're doing this strategically through the IRS, and then we'll do a secondary form of sending them the notice, which is optional, which I recommend, but it's optional, right? Now we're diving into all the good stuff, guys, right? The first thing, like I said, as you go into this, you get your 28, 48, and 56 filed and submitted, right? You guys can do that in the next 2 weeks. If you just go on the campus, watch the video, send it out, right? Verify they received it, make sure that they file it, it's on file, and you're good to go, right? That's the first step. The next step is we're gonna get educated on this stuff. While I've already gone through a lot of this material, I still think a lot of people are missing the ball here. No one understands the history of this. No one really knows the power of negotiable instruments and how these debts work, how securities work, and where it all stems from, right? And so in 1933, the way people paid their debts changed. Back then, people used real money like gold and silver. After 1933, the government made a new system where people could pay off debts without using gold or silver. And even without using real money at all, instead, it's possible to use legal tools to cancel or settle your debt in a different way. And that's one thing people are missing, right? There's multiple ways to cancel debt. And because that system changed, what we're using today is a Federal Reserve note. what people are flashing in the music videos and they're carrying in their pockets on a day to day is not actual money, right? It's debt because it's a Federal Reserve note. A note is debt, simply an instrument. The real money is gold and silver. So a long time ago, people traded goods by bartering, right? Like swapping a cow for a bag of grain. But as trade and business grew, using money became easier. So later, people started using promises instead of actual cash. These were called commercial paper, basically written promises to pay someone money. Now, some examples of these promises are checks, which we still use to this day, promissory notes, and drafts, right? And we'll get into more examples of these later. Right? A promissory note and a draft is a promise to pay you later. It's like credit, right? And so when you think of your agreement with the creditors, when you sign an agreement, right, it is your promise to pay. That's why in the agreement it states promise to pay. And so they're giving you credit, right? Because the promissory note they gave you is extending credit. So you're promising to pay later. So that's what promissory note is. Checks, we all know what a check is. You pay it out to somebody and you either specially endorse it to an individual or you draft an open check where one can then redeem at their own will, right? So merchants and traders use these papers so much that they made rules about how they worked and how they handled the disagreements. These rules became the law of negotiable instruments. And over time, every state made their own rules official by passing Negotiable Instruments Act. Later, all these rules were combined into one big law, Uniform Commercial Code, specifically Article 3. So UCC 3 covers commercial paper. And so I do cover this in the Bill Remittance 1.0, but I did make some updates and limited and combined a lot of that info. And so you will find majority of it here. In 1987, the US Congress passed another law, the Expedited Funds Availability Act, to make money from checks available faster. This changed some old state laws. Also, Article 3 was updated to match these new federal laws. So this was a change that had happened later on to allow checks to become available faster. Today, Article 3 of the UCC is the main law that controls how checks, notes, and other negotiable instruments work in the US. What's a Social Security trust, right? Where you were born, the government created a trust account, right? And this is why we're operating in trust. And so, how is this all related to having your paperwork in order? You need to be acting as the administrator because you're going to be applying this process. You have to be able to prove who you are. You have to be able to show the paperwork that you are administrating the trust, that you are the one in charge of handling those notes and those bonds on paper. And so it's linked to a social security number and your name written in all caps, right? That all caps name is like a business or company the government set up for you. This is sometimes called a straw man or the 𝐶𝐸 trust. That account is meant to pay and settle certain debts, not with your personal money, but through the legal system using special paperwork. Okay? And so this is where I want to highlight. The reason why the debt is so high is because no one knows how to offset it. No one knows how to offset the debt. And so it just keeps growing. And the only way to offset it is with the special paperwork and through this legal system. Hence why we're teaching and we're covering specifically how the legal system works, the words behind the legal system, and all of the definitions. Who is a straw man? It's just the business version of you. You're the real person. You're the one in charge of it. And how do you prove you're in charge of it? You have to have your paperwork in order, right? Establish that you're the administrator with the IRS, have a trust, make sure you have your fiduciary notice on file, and that you're the one in charge of handling these debts, right? You have your certificate of trust, your power of attorneys, your fiduciary notice. Those documents are pretty core when it comes to saying, hey, I am the, here's all the proof. And so you use your knowledge, your tools to help that character settle debts, bills, and more. What's real money? Real money is gold and silver, right? Or actual valuable items you can trade. Today, what we use, like the dollar bills, it's actually called Federal Reserve notes. The note is a promise to pay. It's not real money itself. It's an IOU. And so the dollars we carry today are more like credit, and they're not backed by gold or silver, right? When they change this system, this process, why it's important to understand the history, we're not carrying money. And so the system was built for us to basically work for IOUs. So we're saving up IOUs rather than real money, real wealth. The real wealth is gold and silver. And so I may have 1 million Federal Reserve notes. That doesn't mean I'm wealthy because I don't even have money. I just have IOUs in the bank account. The real money is in the gold and silver. And so you want to use the IOUs to obtain the gold and silver. Turning bills into payments. When you get a bill in the mail, like for phone or electric bill, right? It might look like it's asking for money, but it's more than that. The bill can be treated like a check, a negotiable instrument. But if you know how to fill it out the right way, you may be able to use it to pay off or cancel the debt it's asking for. This process is called discharging a debt, and it works by signing and returning it a legal way that says, I accept this, and here's how I'm settling it, right? And so we're not saying this is what you need to say. These are examples. I'm going to walk you through later on specifically what the law says you should be writing on those instruments to be able to offset the debt. What is the real definition of a payment, right? Legal terms of a payment doesn't always mean handing over cash. It means keeping a promise to pay. Even if that promise is completed in a different way, like by sending a signed bill, promissory note, or other document that's accepted as payment, even making a partial payment can sometimes count as legally paying part of a debt. Important tips that you guys need to know is when you're dealing with this process, you cannot be opted in to paperless billing. Because if you're opted into paperless billing, you can't take advantage of it. All right. Paperless billing is actually holding you back from being able to endorse these instruments, right? So you want to make sure everything is paper billing. You want to opt out of paperless. There's a reason why there's an incentive to opt into paperless, right? Whether if you got a phone bill, they want to chop down your monthly credit card bill, or they'll give you some sort of a monthly discount, right? They're giving you an incentive. There's a reason why. And so pay close attention to all those cues. What are negotiable instruments, right? The negotiable instruments are written and signed legal documents that make sure that one person, a payer, promises to pay or repay another person, either on demand or within a set period of time. There are some of the safest ways to pay because they clearly show the name of the person, the issuer, the name of the person receiving it, and the recipient. And this is another reason why, guys, when they create these UCCs and the 31 CFRs, it's because it needs to clearly state the instructions. If it's not clear, they will not be acceptable. And so they deem this one of the safest ways to do it because of how clear it's made, how direct it is. There's no confusion, right? These documents can easily be transferred to someone else so the receiver can cash it or sign it over to another person. And so these are some of the examples, right? A promissory note, check, there's certificate of deposits, money orders, and bearer bonds. We'll break down each of these later on, guys, but we're covering the basics. And as you see, I'm trying to simplify what all of this means for you because it's very important. You need to understand this stuff. What does negotiability mean? The idea of negotiability is one of the most important parts of commercial paper. A negotiable instrument is basically a piece of paper that acts like money. It can be transferred from one person to another multiple times without actually using cash. Think of it like a check, right? The check is the number one most negotiable one. And this is the best example I give, right? When someone writes a check and gives it to you, and when you sign the back of it, right, which is AKA endorsing it, and give it to someone else, they can do the same, right? And so each time it's passed on, it counts as payment to the next person. And so think of it, a bank, right? Let's say you work at Sam's Club, right? And me as Sam's Club, and Sam's Club is basically paying you weekly. So you go, you collect your check, you sign the back, and then you hand it to the bank. What does the bank do with it? They redeem it. And so this is what that example is. The example here is that someone writes a check, gives it to you, which is Sam's Club. You sign the back, right? Remember, you flip it and you put your name and your signature in the back, and then you give it to the bank, and then they can do the same. That's what this means. And so that's the best example I can give you for that example or for that scenario. So what makes it a negotiable instrument? A negotiable instrument is a written document signed by a person who made or issued it, right? And this is in the legal terms, maker or drawer, right? The maker is the one that is creating, the other one is the drawer. Contains a promise to pay or an order to pay a specific amount of money, payable either on demand whenever asked or at a specific time, payable to bearer, whoever holds it, or to a named person. And so the differences here are when you think about payable to bearer is basically whoever holds it. So for example, I say, hey, payable to bearer. That person can then take it and then claim it. But if I say payable to John Doe, only John Doe can claim it, right? But when I place payable to bearer, John Doe or even John Doe can take it, give it to his sister, and then his sister can claim it because it's payable to bearer. It's no specific name that was listed on there. And so the bearer basically gives it an open book. It's like an open book. It was written and provided as an open book, and then now whoever has it can claim it. But if you place the name on it, only that individual can claim it. These documents can be transferred from one person to another and accepted as substitutive cash. Now, this is an example of a negotiable instrument, right? You've got the amount. This is giving you the date, the amount of time, right? There's a specific amount of time for a promise to pay. Usually, when you look at a check, it says void after 90 days, right? Or it gives you like a 90-day period for checks. This one says 60, right? After 60 days, I promise to pay, or 60 days after, right? March 10th, 2025, 60 days after I promise to pay in the order of this person. And so that's basically saying that after this day, 60 days after March 10th, 2025, that would basically say what's that May. So it'll be May 10th. By May 10th, that's when this is valid, right? This is valid because it has a specific time frame. And it's paid to the order of Robert Jones, right? When it's payable to bearer, payable promise to pay to the order of payable to bearer, right? You're leaving it open. But that person who receives it then has to endorse it to redeem it. But it has the amount, the payable amount, right? Payable at the bank, right? It's specifying which bank. Normally, when you guys look at negotiable instrument, when you receive it in the mail, it has the bank on it already. Value received with interest at 7%. Now, this is just an additional, right? This additional piece of instruction, right? This isn't on every negotiable instrument, but again, this is an example of negotiable instrument. And this number here usually would be like your account number, right? This is that memo part I was sharing before. You want to put your account number at the bottom because if, let's say it's a credit card, you put your credit card account number. Or it's an auto loan, put your auto loan account number. Um, and you put the due date and then sign, right? And so that's what qualifies it to be a negotiable instrument. It must be written, it must be signed by the maker or drawer, be an unconditional promise to pay or order to pay, state a specific sum, be payable on demand or at a definite time, and be payable to the order or bearer. And so a lot of you are just like, all right, well, how do I know I'm doing this right? Here it is. That's how you create a negotiable instrument. These are the qualifications of a negotiable instrument. Now, I'm going to provide more examples later on, but we're still covering all the basics. So why does this matter, right? It's important to know whether the document is negotiable because if it is, any legal dispute involves it being handled under the Article 3 of the Uniform Commercial Code. And so this qualifies it to be under the Uniform Commercial Code because it meets all of these requirements. And this is how you determine that. And that's why I'm really diving deep into the basic fundamentals because people are missing this part. Everyone is just going through to the process and they're just skipping like, oh, the video is showing to do this and that. I'm like, do you even understand what qualifies it to be a negotiable instrument? And so that's what we're covering here. All the basics. It's extremely important. I can't emphasize this enough. Now, these are the types of negotiable instruments, right? I managed to try to get some real-time examples for you guys to visually see, but we're going to cover each of the different ones because they all have a different purpose. And it's important that you have these guidelines to be able to identify which ones you're using, which ones to endorse a certain way, and what purpose each of them serve. There are different kinds of negotiable instruments. Each one is a safe written promise that helps people and businesses move money without using cash. All right, here are the main types. So a lot of people are familiar with the check, which is a paper note, and it tells the bank to pay a certain amount of money from one person's account to another. It includes the name of the person getting paid, the payee, the account number, and the name of the person paying, the issuer. Checks are very safe because even if one gets lost, no random person can cash it. It can only be used by a person whose name is on it. Although transferring the money takes time, people and businesses still like using checks because they're secure and reliable, which is very true. Right? And then there's the different types of checks. You have a traveler's check, a personal check, certified, and a cashier's. Right? One's used while traveling, one's from your bank account, the other one's guaranteed by your bank, and the other one the bank pays on your behalf. The promissory notes, right? And again, this is an example of a check, right? These are all the qualifications of a check. You have the amount, the date, the signature. Remember, this is the RE is usually where you would put the notes, right? This is where you put the account number, right? And you have the dollar amount, who it's payable to, right? And then at the top of the check, it'll obviously have your name on it, right? Because you're the one issuing it. So these are all the qualifications of a check. The promissory note. A promissory note is a written promise where one person, the maker, agrees to set the amount of money to another person on or before a specific date. And so often used in short-term loans or trade credit between businesses. If the maker doesn't pay by the agreed date, the other person legally claim the money owed, right? Companies use promissory notes as a debt instrument to raise money for short-term projects. And I know everybody's familiar with this. This is all on your agreements. Anyone's got a credit card, anyone's got a mortgage, Anyone's got a loan, a personal loan, you got a promissory note. You sign a promissory note. You agree to pay a certain amount by a certain period of time. And so when they make that legal claim, right? When they make that legal claim that you owe them or they sue you, it's because of, of the fact that you made an agreement, right? This was a promise to pay. There was a promise to pay between you and the court and the creditor or whoever extending the credit. So this is what a standard format looks like. Now they look a little different here and there, but these are the minimal requirements of a promissory note, right? And so this is why it's important to understand the basics because as you guys are starting to really read agreements and you're starting to read um, the way things are being endorsed on certain documents, you'll start getting a better understanding of what all of it means, right? Now you know what a promissory note is. Or in the time you go into a bank and you're asking for a loan, you're basically asking for them to create a promissory note. Literally. It's what it is. It's a debt instrument. Then you have a certificate of deposit, which is a savings product offered by banks, right? And so you can deposit money into a CD for a set period of time, 6 months or a year. The bank keeps it safe and pays you interest for letting them use your money. Now, when CD matures, you get the original money plus earned interest. If you take your money out early, you have to pay a small penalty. The longer you leave your money in a CD, the more interest, and it's a great way to save safely, right? And so, ideally, it'd be better to have a certificate of deposit than it is to have cash, right, in the bank. A certificate of deposit is different, and two, you're earning more interest on it. Bills of exchange. Now, bills of exchange are mainly for large international trade. This is like we're talking about doing trade across different nations and countries. The bills of exchanges are different, right? You're not going to use a negotiable instrument to trade to offset a debt between you and somebody in China. Now, you'd use a bill of exchange. And so the bill of exchange is similar to a promissory note, but it's often used for like the major trades, right? It's big international major trades. It's written order where one person, right, called a drawer, tells the other person, the drawee, to pay a certain amount to someone else or payee on a specific date. The drawee is has a legal claim to the money written on the bill and the document makes a trade between the countries safer and faster. Now, instead of let's say you had a bill of exchange for 500,000. Now, instead of moving around with 500,000, you could create a bill of exchange according to its requirements, right? And this is what a standard bill of exchange looks like. And I found an example online of one from like Bangkok, so you guys can have an example. But this is what a standard bill of exchange looks like. They're all pretty similar because they all require you to pay you basically write an order to an individual that's required to pay a specific amount by a specific amount of time or date, right? They're all very similar, but they're different in their own way. And it's how it's written out. And they all serve different purposes. So this is why it's important to understand all of the differences because you need to know what you're working with and what you're focused on. Then you have money orders, which work like checks, but you pay up front. So you're loading it. You're basically loading the money up front. Then you'll receive a money order in exchange. And they give you the money order with the written amount on it based on what you paid. And you can send it to someone who can easily cash it, right? And it's very safe and it's perfect for people who don't have a bank account since it guarantees that the money has already been paid, right? So the money order is just like a secure check. You think about like a secure credit card. If I was to go and, I needed a credit card and the bank didn't really know whether, you're good at managing money, you just put some money in a secure card. Now they'll give you a credit card. And so same thing here, you don't have anyone that has access to a bank and you're not quite sure if that individual is going to be able to write a check that won't bounce. And so you need a money order instead. And this is another reason why a lot of a lot of apartment complexes accept money orders because they don't have to worry about the checks bouncing, and they know for sure that that money's there, that the money was loaded uh, beforehand, and so they're gonna just simply go and cash it because they know it's there. And then you have bearer bonds, right? I haven't really looked too deep into bearer bonds, but these are unregistered bonds issued by governments or big companies who physically hold bonds, right? So when we talk about these guys, they're mainly when we're dealing with coupons. And so bearer bonds are could be used in multiple ways, right? You have bonds that you can secure under trusts as asset protection, and then there's bonds you can use to claim interest on from coupons or for payment purposes. So there's different types. Now, when it comes to securing bonds, we talk about that a little bit later on, but I mainly focus on the interest and the coupons. But when we're talking about securing the assets and the bonds, right, I cover the general basics, like the different types of ways you can secure, but I haven't yet been down that road where we're talking how to put a mechanic's lien on an auto loan or how to put a mortgage lien on a house, right? That's how you secure the bonds. You basically you need to protect them, right? The bonds are the asset. It's not the house. That's why they don't come after the house. They come after the security, right? They come after your promise to pay. They come after the agreement. They know where the money is. The money is in the bonds and the securities. And so when you're dealing with this stuff, this is the big companies, this is big tech, right? That's what they're really focused on when it comes to even when you're going to court and you have to do jail time, they're dealing with bonds, right? They're dealing with bonds. And so if you understand the depths of how bonds work in various aspects, then you'll understand how to navigate through all those. And the reason why I said I don't know too much about them is because there's way too much to understand about this, right? Where I've really only been focused on is the coupon piece, because I'm only looking to master this part. I'm not looking to become good at all of them. Like I just need to master one thing at a time. And so when dealing with bonds, right? If you lose it, it's gone forever. And there's no record, right? And so theft or damage can be a major problem. While there's ways, I've been working on putting together ways to file lost securities. You can do that through the Federal Reserve so that they can have that on record for tax purposes. But it's very true that once you do lose it, it's like it is gone, right? It's security. They mailed it to you in the first place, and it was created and mailed, and so it was up to you to redeem it or not. And so a couple examples of this would be a person borrows 100,000 from the bank, and the bank checks her credit score and income to make sure that he or she can repay it, to make it official, and signs a promissory note, right? Promising that to pay the money back on time. And if she doesn't, the bank can take legal action using the note as proof. And so the proof, again, is an agreement. You sign an agreement, a promissory note agreement. Most people, when they're going about their day to day, they're not thinking about promissory notes. Like, I'm not going to talk to each and every one of you and like, hey, man, like, I know you got a credit card the other day, what did their promissory note say? No, you can ask them like, well, what does the agreement look like? That's different. It's the same thing though, right? Because that's what the agreement's about. It's about the promise to pay. And so in the agreement, you made a promise to pay. And so it's basically the same thing. And I'm just giving you guys real-time examples. And so, a few things to really understand about these trends, guys, is different countries have made laws that make sure negotiable instruments are used fairly and safely. Now, believe it or not, other parts of the world do use it. Like India has a Negotiable Instruments Act, right, of 1881 that sets the rules for how these documents work and protects everyone involved. Now, you'll be quite interested if you guys start doing research. You'll see a lot of videos in India, UK, other parts of the world talking about negotiable instruments and so forth, right? Because this is universal stuff, guys. It's so you can do business internationally when it comes to bills of exchange, and negotiable instruments just vary by the laws that were created in your country or the states. And so in the United States, it all comes down to UCC Article 3, which is a little bit different from what India's Negotiable Instrument Act would say. While I wouldn't doubt that it's a little bit similar, there's a lot of differences that you would have to read to understand. And so with India, later in 2017, they amended the bill and added uh, to protect people if a check bounces, right? Which is if it's dishonored, right? So if a check bounces, they added a protection. And so these changes happen in real time, and we have to keep up with it. And this is why I'm covering a little bit of history, because we're trying to jump into something we know nothing about. Absolutely, right? We're trying to jump into something we know nothing about. We got to cover the history, the basics. Now, I'd be happy to provide you guys with some citations of where I got a bunch of this info so you could do reading. But I think understanding the general basics is the first step, right? I've simplified it all. And so I do need you guys to go through this before you apply anything, because ultimately you're going to start asking questions that are here and they're answered, and everything's right in front of us. And so the modern versus traditional. Now, this comes down to digital payments like debit cards, credit cards, online transfers, and other popular things that we use nowadays, right? They're faster, they're easier, and it's more convenient, right? That's what people prefer to do because nobody is carrying securities with them, right? But when it comes to large amounts of money, and this is why I talk to you guys about how you should handle negotiable instruments. Negotiable instruments are good for things like mortgages and auto loans and personal loans, right? You shouldn't be stressing about doing negotiable instruments for a $120 light bill. Like you should be focused on the big ticket items, because that's where you'll get the most benefit from, especially if you're going to go through all that effort of making sure it's done correctly, submitted to the right person. And if you've done everything properly and for some reason it's not being accepted, you can enforce it knowing what you know, right? If you know you've checked all the boxes, it qualifies as a negotiable instrument, they fail to accept it, and you can enforce it. But in the meantime, I don't recommend you wasting time on small bills, because those aren't really going to be game changer. You want to be going after the big tickets. And I've also posted a resource here for you guys, the Bill of Exchange, right? This covers the history of Bill of Exchange, right? You want to see Bill of Exchange to understand ideally where the United States stands when it comes to international payments and basically exchanging money across the world. So for the next module, guys, what we're covering here, and I will end it here for this call with the negotiable instruments and trusts, because we're covering everything so far, and I'm going to do a second call continuing. It's a continuation of the rest, and then we'll get into some real live examples here at the end. And so why negotiable instruments and trusts go hand in hand, right? These go hand in hand because negotiable instruments are financial documents that guarantee a payment of specific amount of money, either on demand or a set time, right? And we've covered the basics. So why you want to get into a trust before doing anything? So before attempting to set off bills, you must establish a trust structure. Begin in trust legally. Being in trust legally separates you from the property, debts, assets, creating a layer of protection. And so remember what I told you guys about the law of presumption, right? Everything's operated on presumption. So they'll presume that you are this person until you can prove otherwise. But how do you do that? You need all this stuff in order, right? And so you have to create a revocable living trust, which is used to manage and set off bills, right? Loans, auto loans, mortgages, etc. And then the irrevocable trust is used to protect them, right? And so you once you set them off, you then now move them into your irrevocable, right? And that's where a lot of individuals don't realize that you may have set it off, but it doesn't protect you from creditors because these creditors are money hungry. And so they're going to do everything in their power to try to make some money. The next step you want to take is you want to set up a trust account. So each trust needs its own bank account, right? And before I did share with you guys how to create a trust, I then in the example that I shared, I created a trust with my name, right? My all caps name. For this particular situation, I recommend you create a trust in a form of a business name. Now, it can be, you can leverage things such as initials, right? Like I would do EM, trust, uh, or, EM, let's say, I'm just giving an example like EM accounts trust, right? Just this name. And so I'm now creating a business name because if I use my name, it's easily identifiable. And you want to avoid is making it easily identifiable. And so ideally, you want to act like a business. I cover that in the business fundamental class where when you're naming your original business, where like I call my business E&A Consulting Group, right? LLC, no one knows what type of business I do unless I tell them. And so you want to do the same thing here because the reason why we're picking a name that sounds like a business is to so the bank doesn't make the assumption that you're creating a personal bank account. And so once you've created your name for your trust and you've created a trust, you want to get your EIN, right, from the IRS. You're going to open up a business bank account for the trust, right? And you want to open up a non-interest bearing account. I'm going to add this on here, but the reason you want to open that up is because it's very specific to what you're doing. So non-interest bearing account, you're going to use it to administer all of your bills, right? It's going to be the main account and it's under the trust. And having the trust bank account, your certificate of trust, your power of attorney, fiduciary, all those documents are just layers of proof that you are an administrator and that they're not you, right? You're not the person personally paying those bills yourself. Because that's what majority of everyone's doing. They're personally eating all the bills. They're personally paying them off with their Federal Reserve notes versus administrating them. And so we administrating them. And the best way I can explain this is you know how attorneys work, right? Attorneys have to present what's called a bar card, right? And in order for you to prove that you are certified to be an attorney, right? If I'm assuming. And so in this particular case, you have to be able to present your certificate of trust, and you have to present your power of attorney, all those documents to prove who you are. And that's all that this stuff is. It's proof. And so the most important thing that you never want to do when dealing with this, guys, is you never want to give them your social when creating a trust bank account. The moment you give them the social, you just connected it to your personal. Now it's public. It's no longer a private matter. And so, how do you avoid this? There's two things you can do. Use a name that sounds like a business, right? A trust name needs to sound like a business. And two, have an EIN and have your certificate of trust. With those three things, you can now open a trust bank account. Now, if you go to a bank and they push back, just move on. It's not that big of a deal. Like, you got to remember how banks work. The bank is there to collect interest off of your money, right? And so if a bank is not accepting you and you're willing to go to them as a customer to put money in there so they can make interest off of it, well, this is a little bit of a different account, right? It's a non-interest bearing account because it's a trust, but you're a customer at the end of the day. And so when you go to the bank and they don't accept what you have to offer, just move on. They just don't want to do business. That's their loss. It's not yours. So just move on to the next one. And I'm gonna give you guys a few banks that I know for sure. Like I have a trust bank account with Wells. They were pretty easy to open up with. There's a couple other ones, a few other ones that I'm sharing in here as well that you guys are gonna be able to leverage. So you want to use your trust to set off the debts. Once your trust accounts are ready, you can begin to process those negotiable instruments to set them off. And now, so how does it work? Right? Essentially, you're using the trust as the administrator to settle bills and apply credits on the back end. The trust issues the negotiable instruments, right? The promissory note, bills of exchange, to offset the debt. This is where being structured in trust matters, right? Because the trust, not you personally, becomes the controlling entity, right? And so that's how you create the separation. And if you're simply going and endorsing it without having a trust in place, now you're personally taking ownership of that, right? You're not creating any separation. When it comes to securing the property after you set off the debt, after you set off the debt, you want to secure the position so the creditors can't come on the back end and reassert the claims. So why you need a commercial lien, right? The commercial lien establishes a legal claim to the property, assets, and funds connected to the transaction. And once the lien is filed, transfer it into the trust for maximum protection. This step is crucial for mortgages, auto loans, and other large debts because without it, creditors can circle back and try to reclaim it. And so I believe I posted, so I made a post explaining which liens are appropriate for different situations. So you want to check that out for more info, guys. So if you go to the search bar and you just search up liens in the main campus, then you'll actually see the post I made. Just search up liens in the main campus. You'll see the post I made and it breaks it all down. And so the revocable trust is mainly to handle all your loans, mortgages, auto loans, credit card bills, etc. While the irrevocable is to protect everything. That's the asset protection. That's after everything's been discharged. And so when you're placing a lien on it, guys, you're going back for the bond, right? Right? For the debt, loan, mortgage bond, because this is where the real leverage is. Once a negotiable instrument is set off, focus on the bond behind the transaction. The trust can assert its rightful claim to the credits associated with the bond. This is how you protect the equity, reduce liability, and create long-term financial control. Now, back to what I was telling you guys about the bonds. The bonds is what these major corporations are working with, so what the courts are working with, and that's what they're playing. They're playing in the game of bonds. And so by understanding this particular part of securing them, you'll now secure your assets. You never have to worry about someone trying to come claim it, right? There's individuals I've seen on the news, they paid off a $800,000 mortgage, owed a $3,000 tax bill, and then they were foreclosed on for $3,000 when the mortgage was paid. And so this is the stuff that protects you from that because these individuals are going to come try to claim it or these corporations. You always want to keep the paperwork, guys. It's extremely important. You keep it, your EIN, your bank documents, right? File it, and nobody should see that stuff, just you. All right. The only time you should present any trust information is to the bank, which is a certificate of trust. And I provide that for you guys right here, right? There's a certificate of trust example. Now, choosing a friendly bank or institution. Now, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Truist, Fidelity, and Charles Schwab. I know those are trust-friendly banks. I personally have Charles Schwab, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. Truist, these are available in different areas. And so I know for Wells, I was able to do a lot of my stuff online, like create a business bank account and all that kind of stuff. They allowed me to do it online. So that's what I liked about them. Bank of America, I had to go in person to handle all of my affairs. And so, and Charles Schwab is good for, trusted bank accounts, right? They're also really good for that. Now, while they're all bank trust friendly, you want to pick one that you know is going to best suit you based on your location. You could try one or two and see which one best fits for you. But again, if it doesn't work, just move on. I'm just laying out options based on the experiences I've had. Remember, you're leveraging trust law, commercial codes, and financial instruments. And if you don't follow the legal processes, creditors can still enforce claims. So by having everything you need, staying organized, like I share with you, you shouldn't have any problems. And it's pretty much laid out for you guys. When you get here, you're basically following these steps, right? You want to create a revocable trust. I have a video here on how to do that for completely free, right? A revocable trust. Where's the video? Oh, here, trust tutorial, right? How to create a revocable trust. Super easy, right? I covered that in an hour and a half. You guys can do it in a day. You can create a trust. Just watch the video. You guys don't have to wait to do this stuff. It doesn't require any money, right? I'm showing you guys, I'm giving you guys all the tools and resources you need to just get up off the ground and do this. You should be doing this anyways. Even if you don't plan on using negotiable instruments, you should have a trust. I don't care if you could care less about this stuff. You need a trust. End of story, right? I got two trusts. Regardless of the fact if you plan or not plan on using this, you still need a trust. Like it makes no sense to not have a trust, especially if you've got kids. If you've got kids and you don't have a trust, you want the government, you basically, if anything was to happen, you just want the government to walk all over anything you have, right? They're going to give your kids a hard time when it comes to claiming anything. Now, when you have a trust and you put that stuff in the trust, they can't come and claim anything, right? It just makes the transfer of assets, and you're able to hand down um, anything that you owe to your kids without any of those issues. And so I recommend you always have a trust. And so that'll summarize that call. I'm going to leave it open for any questions. I know I went into a lot of info. A lot of that stuff was the basic, boring stuff that I know some of you have already read through, but I need to revisit all of it again. Like I really do feel like I still get a lot of the same questions, and it's only beneficial if it's only beneficial if you guys understand the basics. Because I know for a lot of you guys, you understand the credit part so well when I teach credit. Like I see you guys answering questions throughout the campus. Like that's what I want. I want you guys to be able to also do the same. If you can't do it at that level, you don't understand it. Awesome. And so I just opened it up for you guys to unmute. And so if you guys have questions, feel free to ask.
Well, I am really happy that you really broke down bill endorsements because I did not know that. Like I knew the process, but I did not know that.
Yeah. And so it's very delicate. It's a delicate process. Um, all the information that I just went over again, I am regurgitating, but I'm going through a very, very different way of executing it. And this is actually truly is the way we should be executing it as the administrator. Because while covering the CFRs and the UCCs, I went over all that stuff. I didn't change anything. This time I'm sticking more to the book. I'm not going off of examples of things that did work for others because I was revisiting some of what the materials that the individuals were doing and how they had success. It wasn't by the book, right? Like how they were writing the UCCs on the documents, right? When you read the instructions, when I show you guys the examples that are in the bill remittance 2.0 class, those aren't there. And so it's not necessary. While again, it worked for those individuals, I still want to only stick to the book. I want to teach you guys the only way that they're instructing us to do it. That's it. Any other questions before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just want to chime in real quick, Eric. So yesterday I called the IRS to follow up about my 2848 form and 56 form. And I spoke to the rep, and they got my 2848 form because I faxed it to the same department based on the state I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And she gave me a totally different address to mail the form 56 out. So I just want to mention that the address that she gave me, um,
Drop it
on,
in the campus.
all right, got you. I'll drop it
Appreciate
in,
it, my brother. Appreciate it.
no doubt.
Yeah. With the IRS, they're straightforward, man. They're pretty straightforward. And so when it comes to the Form 56 and the 2848, just follow the instructions. Uh, she's probably 100% right. The instructions are in the what are they called for the IRS? The publications. In the IRS publications. Any other questions? Awesome. So